It's Marvel Snap Patch Week, and that means new Marvel Snap Datamined. Let's go ahead and dive on into giving you my thoughts on our first look at the May season cards, as well as a handful of others that were added to the client without tagged release dates. Let's get into it. Our May Season Pass card looks to be Esme Kuko, a 3/4 with the on reveal, copy a card from your deck into your hand, set its cost to 3 and its power to 4. It's been a while since we got a card that looks like it's going to be as big of an upgrade as Esme will be for Mr. Negative. A lot of the cards that synergize with this one fit that Mr. Negative archetype to a T. Iron Man, Gore, Arnim Zola, even Null in some builds will all love having their cost reduced and will love having their power increased. This card could also potentially see play inside of decks that like using Agent Venom or Bast, as those cards enjoy increasing your stats. And if you get, a random 3 or 4 that typically has low stats to start, Esme is still upgrading it a solid amount. It'll be interesting to see whether or not this card focuses around big combos for its successful decks or something smaller and more consistent, just giving you more numbers on the things that you're playing. Our first weekly card release for the May series, set to release on the 6th alongside the season debut, is Surge, a 2/2 who has the on reveal, give the top card of your deck -1 cost and +1 power. After you play it, repeat this ability. This card seems like it will be an absolute monster inside of the Sanctum Showdown mode when that eventually returns. It gives you something to play out to the board early, and decks in that game mode are typically built around cards that want to be played out ASAP with lower energy cost, which really maximizes her effect. To get the most out of Surge over the course of the game, you're going to want to constantly be playing whatever card you draw turn after turn. And if you start with her on turn 2, that means you could theoretically be getting as many as 4 additional cards with extra power and at a discounted rate. This card, as far as it falls on your curve, seems like it could be another good one to slot into various Zabu Psylocke decks full of 4 energy cards, because you hit a 4 energy card on turn 2, it costs 3, and then you can play it out right away and keep this Surge effect rolling while also getting the most stats and effects for the energy that you're spending. Set to release on May 13th, we have Prodigy, a 3/4 whose on reveal says, if this is in the back row, copy the text of the card in front of it. I'm really excited to see more cards past Captain Carter from the April review that look to be leveraging the front versus back row mechanic. This is going to introduce such an interesting amount of sequencing decision and depth to the game. Prodigy not only references the row that he's being played in, but he also explicitly cares about the card that's directly in front of him, meaning if you're playing him out as the 3rd card to a location, he's going to be copying the text of the first one there, but if you're playing him in the 4th spot, he's going to copy the text of the 2nd. One dynamic that's going to be interesting with this card is how clog decks and cards that clog the opponent's side of the board will need to be thought about moving forward. You're going to want to be tactical about where you are putting your extra debris rocks, or perhaps a Green Goblin or a Titania, thinking about how it could impact a Prodigy or other cards with a design like this moving forward. I expect when this card copies the text, it'll also re-trigger on reveals of the card with it, which seems like it could be incredibly strong. One potentially fun combo thing that Prodigy opens up is he is effectively another copy of a Mystique type effect for a Wong, assuming you play it directly behind it, which give your last on reveal in that row a massive boost. Set to release on May 20th, we have Elixir, a 1/1 with the activate ability. The next time one of your cards is destroyed this turn, revive it. This card obviously has some counterplay potential in a Shang-Chi heavy metagame. You could just simply activate Elixir on the last turn of the game, and when your opponent blows up one of your things because they didn't have priority, Elixir can go ahead and just bring it right on back, getting you value out of potentially on-reveal effects for a second time. Speaking of that, Elixir could also be a synergy build around card. You blow up your own on reveal card and have it pop back up at the Elixir location, giving you its effect again. This seems like it could especially have potency inside of a deck playing things like Misery to get you those on reveal effects an absolutely absurd number of times. Zorn is data mined to release on May 27th. He is a 2/3 that says after any 3 or 4 cost card is played here, move it to another location. This card has two interesting dynamics going on with it. The first is the easy and obvious. This is a move enabler for cards that cost 3 and 4. Explicitly, this being a 2 energy card means you can play Zorn on 2, and then you can play a Vulture into his path on 3 and kick it to another location, making it larger. The second dynamic is that this is a card that keeps opposing 3 and 4 cost cards out of his lane. So in a particular matchup where you know your opponent's going to be leaning on those particular spots on their curve to get stats, Zorn can effectively be a means to keep the opponent from adding meaningful numbers into play at a particular location. Our next 3 cards don't have a specific release date tagged in their data mine, but they're also tagged as releasing directly to Series 4. Most recently, whenever a card was tagged this way, it meant it was going to be the prize for a limited time game mode, i.e. High Voltage or Sanctum Showdown. If these are associated with the May season, that's far enough out that that could be the first time we see Sanctum Showdown return, and potentially they're going to have 3 new cards releasing inside of that mechanism like we saw the first time. The first of these cards is Kid Omega, a 2/2 with the activate ability, destroy the next card you play this turn to gain its power. The first thing that jumps out in my mind is that this would have pretty good synergy with Elixir that we looked at just a moment ago. In theory, you could curve Elixir on 1, Kid Omega on 2, activate both of them, Kid Omega, Elixir, and then Kid Omega, and then play out a 3 energy card to Omega's path, blow it up, and then bring it back at Elixir's location. Assuming you're playing out an on reveal effect when you do this, you would essentially double up its on reveal on the 3rd turn of the game, which is a line that we don't currently have available to us in Marvel Snap. Our next card is Hellion, a 5/8 with the on reveal. Next turn, you can move cards to this location. Essentially a one-sided cloak effect. This is way more powerful since it is just one-sided, which I assume is why it costs significantly more energy than cloak. Especially going into the 6th and final turn of the game, being able to have basically all of your cards on the board be where they are, but also in Hellion's location simultaneously has a lot of value. The big question mark in my mind for this card is whether or not it's purely a move enabler, i.e. is it just moving daggers and vultures and human torches on the last turn of the game, or as a 5/8, is it potentially powerful enough that it's worth playing in decks without a bunch of move payoffs, strictly because being able to threaten where all your power is at on the board is going to allow you to juke a lot of your opponents out of big cubes on the 6th turn of the game. Potentially releasing as an anti-Hellion / move card at the same time, we have Mercury, a 2/2 who says you can move this once. Ongoing, enemy cards here can't move. This is a potent hate card into one of the more mobile decks in Marvel Snap's metagame. This would have definitely been a welcome addition to Snap in a number of spots when the move deck ultimately ended up being nerfed because it had too much going on. The fact that this card can also move itself gives you a lot of flexibility to get your opponent in key spots. You play out Mercury on turn 2 or turn 3, and your opponent knows they're not going to be able to move from that spot. But at the same time, they also have to be thinking about, well, what if Mercury jumps to one of the other 2 locations? This is going to be another really powerful ongoing hate card for Spectrum gamers to have in their arsenal, and anybody who wants to shut down move as an archetype can reach for whenever they feel like it's a little bit too popular or powerful. Our last three cards today both have no release date tag and no series information in their data mine. When cards like this have popped up in the past, they've often changed their text boxes entirely before they got release dates and series tags, so take them with a huge grain of salt, but they were in the game file update, so I wanted to go ahead and cover them and give some thoughts. The first of these is Fanfei here, a 4/7 with the activate move your other cards here to the right. The stat line at face value on this is incredibly strong. 7 stats for 4 energy is only marginally below rate. And the fact that this is an activate mechanic means that you are concealing a ton of information about where exactly your points are on the board. Being able to move your cards explicitly to the right also has a lot of synergy with just move decks, since Heimdall, the top end of those decks, is sliding your cards to the left, meaning you could set up Fanfei on 4 and then be able to move to the right and move to the left on the turn Heimdall comes down, adding an incredible amount of stats, but more importantly, leaving a bunch of your cards where they started while making them bigger, which is something Move has often struggled to do in the past. Speaking of cards that changed, Cobra had a completely different text box the time that I looked at it before my break, and it still doesn't have a release date tagged. The latest iteration of this is a 2/3 with the activate ability. Switch one of your opponent's created cards here to your side. This seems like a very reasonable design. That's a fine hate card against things like Erishim, where you'll want to play this out a little bit later once their created card is already down, so you can grab exactly what you want with a little bit of finesse. Finally, we have Dum Dum Dugan, a 2/3 with the ongoing effect. Your front row cards here have +1 power with the explicit notation that he can't add power to himself. This card is pretty niche and specific and probably a little bit understated as is. I wouldn't be surprised if its ongoing increase to giving +2 power to the things in front of you, or if it went up to like a base 2/4 perhaps. As templated, it's only going to be a 2/5 under meeting the right circumstances, and it's explicitly a card that's only a 2/5 that you generally speaking are going to have to wait to play until later in the game once you've filled up your front row. This is a little bit too many hoops to jump through for the pretty minimal payoff that he offers, in my opinion. While there's a lot of sweet designs in today's Datamine, I think my favorite is definitely Surge. I absolutely love playing decks that play to the board early and often, and getting to play more of my cards to the board with her effect sounds like a ton of fun. I would love to hear in the comments down below which of these designs you're most looking forward to, and as always, if you enjoyed my round of today, please smash that like button. If you happen to be new here, consider subscribing to the channel as well. I'm covering Marvel Snap stuff here a few times a week whenever something relevant like this pops up, and I'd love to see you back again in the future. Appreciate everybody that made it all the way to the end, and I hope your next game is excellent.